Hello everyone and welcome back to DET Coach's Beginner's Guide to the Duolingo English Test. In this lesson, we'll learn how to read a DET score report. At the top of the report, you will usually find your personal details, test date, certificate number, and verification information. Institutions can use this information to confirm that your results are authentic and valid. Below that, the most prominent number is your overall score. DET overall scores range from 10 to 160 in 5-point increments. You will usually also see a corresponding CEFR level, such as B1, B2, C1, or C2. This level helps institutions understand your overall English proficiency. Next are the 4 individual subscores: reading, listening, writing, and speaking. These correspond most closely to the section scores you may know from IELTS or TOEFL. Below them are the integrated subscores. Each one combines 2 individual skills. Literacy combines reading and writing, in other words, your reading and writing ability. Comprehension combines reading and listening, or your ability to understand written and spoken English. Conversation combines listening and speaking, in other words, your ability to understand and take part in spoken communication. Production combines writing and speaking, or your ability to produce language. Now, let's use this scoring matrix to see how each question type relates to your scores. Reading question types primarily contribute to your reading subscore. These include read and select, fill in the blanks, read and complete, and interactive reading. Weak performance on these questions will usually lower your reading score. It can also affect literacy and comprehension because both integrated subscores include reading. Among the listening questions, listen and type primarily contributes to your listening subscore. It can also affect comprehension and conversation. Interactive listening is a special case. The earlier questions test listening comprehension, while the final task requires you to write a summary of the conversation. As a result, it can affect not only listening, but also writing. All 4 integrated subscores, literacy, comprehension, conversation, and production, may therefore be affected. Writing question types primarily contribute to your writing subscore. These include write about the photo, interactive writing, and the writing sample. They can also affect literacy and production. Speaking question types primarily contribute to your speaking subscore. These include speak about the photo, read, then speak, interactive speaking, and the speaking sample. They can also affect conversation and production. When you analyze your score report, ask yourself 2 questions. Which question types contribute to this subscore? And have those question types been the least consistent in my recent practice? Let's look at an example. Suppose a student has solid reading and listening scores, but a slightly lower overall score. Their comprehension score may still be strong because it combines reading and listening. However, a low production score would suggest that the student understands English reasonably well but needs to improve their productive skills. In that case, the student should focus on writing and speaking questions. For example, are their write about the photo responses too short? Do they develop their ideas in interactive writing? Do they miss any part of the prompt in read, then speak? Is their speaking sample poorly organized? Now consider a different situation. If a student's literacy score is strong, but their conversation score is low, their reading and writing may be solid, while their listening and speaking need work. They should review listen and type and interactive listening, along with speaking questions such as speak about the photo, read, then speak, and interactive speaking. A score report cannot tell you exactly how many points you lost on each question. It can, however, point you toward the areas you need to review. Finally, let's use the score conversion calculator on this lesson's webpage to compare DET scores with other tests. First, select DET and enter a score. If you enter 120, the calculator gives the following approximate equivalents: IELTS 6.5, TOEFL IBT 87 to 92, Private Academic 55 to 62, and CEFR B2. Change the DET score to 125. The IELTS equivalent remains about 6.5, while the TOEFL range rises to 93 to 97. Enter 130, and the score is roughly equivalent to IELTS 7.0, TOEFL 98 to 103, and 63 Portuguese escudos to 70. The CEFR level usually moves into the C1 range. At 135, the IELTS equivalent is still around 7.0, while the TOEFL range is approximately 104 to 108. This is also a range that many programs with higher language requirements pay close attention to. You can use the calculator to answer 3 quick questions. What IELTS score is my DET target roughly equivalent to? What is the approximate TOEFL equivalent? And which CEFR level does it correspond to? For actual applications, however, always check the official website of your target institution. Some institutions consider only the overall score. Others also consider your subscores. Programs in fields such as education, law, and medicine may have higher requirements. If you have not chosen your target institutions yet, you can use a DET score of 120 as an initial goal. For more competitive institutions or programs, aim for a score between 125 and 130. Finally, log in to DET Coach. After each mock test, do not look only at your overall score. Use your subscores and your performance by question type to identify what is truly holding your score back. I'll see you in the next lesson.